This video is for seniors only. This phrase may sound restrictive to some, but to those who have lived decades and have seen many loves and disappointments, it makes sense. This story is about an older man who was looking for a new purpose in life and became involved with a younger woman. Before moving on, he was captivated by her energy, radiance, and beauty. He thought she was beautiful, but it turned out she was only 20 years old. She had a lot of energy and radiance. However, he did not know that the glow he saw was actually a dark shadow. He knew from the beginning that this relationship would not be easy. He had doubts, but he didn't show them. His heart was still beating vigorously at 70, and he was determined to prove to himself that he had what it took to win and keep an older woman. This hesitation eventually became an obsession. He wanted to give it his all as if it were his last romance. He was feeling young again, but the price of this feeling was expensive, as he later discovered. At first, everything seemed to go well. She surrounded him with praise and affection with sweet words. He felt strong, virile, and relived a youth he thought was long gone. She was able to seduce him with every look, gesture, and word. He did his best to please her and treat her like a queen. She began to make small demands of him with an air of superiority that he thought at first was just charm. Over the next few months, the little humiliations were disguised as advice. She suggested that he take better care of himself and that men his age should not be so physically constrained. At first he laughed, thinking it was a funny joke. But the comments continued and he began to feel his weight. She kept reminding him that he was too old for her. She began to criticize her husband's performance in bed. Her cruel and direct comments shocked him, who thought she was capable of emotional affection and satisfaction. She called him slow and predictable and told him he could not satisfy her as a younger man would. He tried to convince her that his age did not limit his ability to make her happy. But her words were too sharp for him to ignore. He remembered the confidence he had in himself at that moment. He told her that he may not have the youthful vigor, but he was capable of making her feel special with his attention and understanding. He spoke with an honesty and confidence that only a few men his age could possess. She treated him with contempt, mocking his desperate attempts to prove himself. The mockery tore at his heart. He felt humiliated, but tried to convince himself that it was a test of endurance and patience. He thought that if she was patient, she would eventually realize his dedication and courage. With every word she said, he sank further into the place where he felt unworthy and insignificant. Anyone who hears this story will find it easy to criticize his decision to stay. Anyone who has loved deeply knows that love, no matter how painful, can bind us and make us accept things we would not tolerate in any other circumstances. He was not only tied to her youth, but also to the illusion of being able to prove himself to a person who could not see beyond his age. After a new confrontation, in which she made her feel smaller, one night she made a decision. In the mirror she saw a 70-year-old man with wrinkles and age on his face. She also saw in his eyes the weight of his experience. She realized that she needed to express her self-love more loudly. He could no longer live under the shadow of approval from someone who did not accept him for who he was. He decided to face her calmly. He told her that he would leave the relationship, that more than anything he loved his girlfriend, and that he could not continue to be humiliated. She looked at her with surprise, as if she had not expected him to be so brave. At that moment he regained some of the dignity he had lost with every criticism she gave him. The conversation was both painful and liberating. At last he felt he was behaving as befitting his age, not in a sense of weakness, but in a sense of wisdom. He thought of all the years he had lived, his experiences, and how valuable he was, no matter how many wrinkles he accumulated or how old he was. He felt relief when he left his house, something he hadn't experienced in months. He understood that sometimes it is necessary to accept the fact that not everyone understands the value we have, especially those who only see the surface. He realized that he had lost himself by accepting humiliation. But by freeing himself, he not only regained self-respect, but also the serenity and love of a love that could only be given to himself. It was not easy to face the days ahead. It was not easy to face the days that came. He knew that he would remain the same man, a valuable person, who possessed the essence of love even without it. It was his self-love that allowed him to continue. He learned from his experience that not every youth deserves to sacrifice dignity and that true love is the one that welcomes and respects everyone, regardless of age or physical limitations. She found new pleasures months later. He rediscovered old hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and traveled to places he had always wanted to see. He realized that his worth did not depend on the approval of a woman younger than him, but on the peace he felt when he looked at himself. Every wrinkle in his skin was a memory. Each gray hair represented another. He realized that with age comes wisdom and the ability to know what is truly important. He was no longer willing to sacrifice to please others, but focused more on pleasing himself. This story is a good reminder for those in their old age who have similar doubts. Love can be found, but not at the expense of inner peace. Only the elderly can appreciate the value of preserving dignity despite the false promises of youth. Looking back on the relationship, she realizes that it was a learning experience. It was an important lesson in acceptance and how to hold one's values above criticism. To be loved, he had to love himself, with all his limitations and virtues. For him, leaving the relationship was a way to regain his self-confidence. And for those who read this story, it may be an example of why self-love can help us maintain our self-confidence even when we feel that everything is conspiring against us. This video is only for older people because they know what dignity means. It realizes that a person's true worth is not determined by their age, but how they handle adversity. It is that integrity that transforms every wrinkle into a symbol of wisdom. I'm going to share 5 valuable lessons based on history for seniors facing challenges in their relationships. First, it's important to remember that while it can be lovely to relive your youth with someone younger than you, it's also vital to keep your feet on the ground and not get lost in the illusion. Like the character in the movie, many people end up giving all their energy and time to someone who doesn't really value them. It is easy to fall into the trap of wanting to prove that you still have vigor and ability. This can lead us to accept humiliations that we would not tolerate in any other phase of our life. Love should not be a place of testing, but of respect. Mutual acceptance. This story teaches us the second lesson, which is that self-love is important. Accepting the harsh comments about his performance and his age was like giving away a part of him. In his mind, accepting criticism out of love was noble, but it lost his dignity. Love yourself first before you start a relationship. When we lose sight of our own worth, we are vulnerable to the scorn of others. Any healthy relationship is built on the recognition that we deserve respect and affection. Third, the third lesson is to have the courage to face loneliness as a way to find peace, however temporary. It was more than a breakup when he left that relationship. He was recovering himself. It was the hardest path he chose, but it is also better to be alone than to continue to be humiliated. Being alone is not always a punishment. Sometimes loneliness can help us reorganize ourselves and regain our self-esteem. He gave himself the opportunity to rebuild his inner calm, something that no one can take away from him. Fourth lesson. As we age, our memories and experiences become treasures. Those who do not see this are trapped in superficiality. Every wrinkle, every gray hair is a lesson, an experience. He realized that he did not need to conform to idealized youth because he already had much deeper wisdom. The superficial seeker will never appreciate the wisdom that comes with age. Therefore, it is not worth trying to please someone who does not understand what we are. The fifth lesson deals with intimacy. People who care about their partner's enjoyment, which includes oral sex and other forms of pleasure, tend to be more generous in their relationships. He thought that, although he no longer had the physical vigor of yesteryear, despite his age, he could still show her affection and desire in other ways. This would demonstrate that the pleasure of a relationship was not limited to physical performance alone. This act of love and devotion usually showed a man willing to put his partner's needs above his pride.